The California drought is terribly serious. Unfortunately, it hasn't risen to national priority level yet. It's primarily a state-based conversation. You're seeing some of the chatter in D.C. as Washington, D.C. tries to raise the profile of what will be an ongoing drought. It's already in its fourth year. Reports have come out since saying that due to climate change and subsequent rising heat, lower precipitation, you're going to see this drought well into the future. But its impact on agriculture is already being felt. You're looking at billions of dollars in terms of the impact of the drought to agriculture. And so we're going to see droughts like this, not only in California, but you're going to see it all across the U.S., particularly in the South, but increasingly creeping up into the mid-level U.S. You'll see more and more of these droughts in the future.
And do you see this primarily as being a problem for the general American population in terms of their kind of domestic consumption, or is it more specific to agriculture? Where do you see it sitting?
Well, there have been a couple estimates. There's a water expert from Arizona who's estimated that a 4% reduction in agriculture and livestock water consumption would translate into a 50% increase in water availability for all residential, commercial, and industrial users. So we do know that we could be a lot more efficient with agriculture, and if we move to a plant-based diet, or more strongly a plant-based diet as the USDA in America is starting to recommend, you would cut water use significantly, simply because meat and to a lesser extent poultry and pork is very water intensive, and a lot of industries are water intensive. So where can we find efficiencies? In the U.S., however, this is increasingly an American problem where we're facing the concept of peak water, where we're withdrawing more water than is being replenished. And so you're seeing 1 out of 10 watersheds already overstressed, and you've got 40 state water managers expecting water shortages to occur in their own states in the next decade.
So given that you are kind of seeing that potential water shortage in the not too distant future, what is looking at being done about it? Is there an appetite for addressing it, or is it put in the too hard basket?
Well, it's interesting because you're seeing a lot of private sector buy municipal water systems in the U.S. because they know full well that water will be priced in the future and there will be water wars. Already you're seeing stories come out in the New York Times and The Economist about the water wars in America. Texas, water war there. Southeast U.S., the water war between Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. Those wars are most often being fought in the courtroom rather than on the battlefield. A lot of talk about how the drought led to the civil war in Syria. Yemen is going to run out of water in a few years. Sao Paulo running out of water. So you're going to see either wars being fought in the courtroom over water access, or physical wars being fought increasingly around the world. There's no urgency around it like there should be. I think people take water for granted. But that needs to change. It needs to come from ultimately the UN, and they did a lot of work this past weekend around World Water Day to raise awareness around this issue. But if world water demand is going to increase, which is slated to increase 55% by 2050, clearly we need to do things differently.
And you've kind of touched on this already, but you co-authored an article on this idea pretty recently with US Congressman Matt Cartwright. So is there political support for change and appetite for addressing this?
You would think, because just in the last couple of years, you're seeing data in the U.S. where 80% of the U.S. is abnormally dry. And last year, 2014, was the hottest year on record ever, thanks to climate change. And so Congressman Cartwright and others are trying to raise awareness about this issue, because the next world war, if you want to call it that, will inevitably be around water. And we're already seeing those wars, as I discussed, in countries. And you'll see it in the U.S., legally now, and hopefully not physically in the future, but there isn't the appetite that I'm hoping for, and I think it will be the ag community ultimately that steps up and says, our survival is at stake, because we cannot continue to farm unless we have the water resources necessary. Now, it's also going to require consumption to change and to move away from water-intensive diets to, as I mentioned, moving away from meat or less meat towards more plant-based diets. But that's also going to be a shift in culture, which will be difficult.